Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to NFL Live Before Lock, presented by Awesemo.com. Sponsor of the show, No House Advantage. Got a great battle brewing between two of the top teams in the NFL, the Green Bay Packers and the San Francisco 49ers. Really expecting some top-notch football tonight. There's nothing to see here. Anyway, joined today by Kyle Dvorchak. Kyle, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. We didn't get any crazy inactives. There weren't a lot of players left standing to make inactive, but they all made it to the game. It is I don't know. Is this the weirdest showdown slate you've ever played? Do you think? I can't really remember another time where you've had so many viable $400 players.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, obviously, DraftKings and FanDuel couldn't anticipate all the COVID rule outs. Among the players that were ruled out, we had Kendrick Bourne and Brandon Ayuk. Deebo Samuel continues to be out. So basically, and then George Kittle, he broke his foot or something. He's out 8 weeks. Jimmy G has an ankle injury. He's out for maybe the rest of the season, maybe a month. And we got a lot of guys that haven't played much NFL football left on this 49ers squad. They did have a boon in Jordan Reed coming back from the IR. That could be big. On the Green Bay side, we were worried about Aaron Jones. He was questionable. He missed last week. Now he's active. And let's break that down real quick because I feel like this is really important information. I know people were eyeing Tyler Ervin. They were eyeing Dexter Williams as maybe value plays tonight. What do you make of Aaron Jones tonight?
Yeah, so I've seen multiple, I saw one report from it was either a beat reporter or one of the national reporters that he wouldn't have played had they had more healthy backs, had they had their Jamal Williams and AJ Dillon available. Aaron Jones, that is, wouldn't have played, but didn't really have much of a choice, and he's healthy enough that they can get him on the field. Also saw multiple reports, not guaranteeing, but speculating that he would play just a limited role, which is still viable. There are so many ways to save salary that 15 points from Aaron Jones could get the job done. So it's not like I'm saying he is an emergency only back by any means, unless, of course, that it would not surprise me if that news somehow dropped 30 minutes into the show. But for now, we assume that he gets not his full role, but some semblance of that. I'm interested in your take on this Tyler Ervin Dexter Williams split, because Tyler Ervin, I believe, has 120 snaps on the season, and 4 of them have come at running back. I think he's still listed at running back, but the team essentially, they use him for whatever 116 of 120 is over 95% or something of his snaps are played at wide receiver. That's what he's done, is play wide receiver all season. But he did come into the NFL at running back, and had Aaron Jones not played, I'm sure they would have transitioned him back, and we could still see that tonight. But he's not running, at least through this point in the season, literally hasn't played more than 4 snaps of running back. So I would have thought Dexter Williams would have been the guy to back Aaron Jones up almost for sure, but there were some reports that Tyler Ervin could still end up playing that role. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say on this Tyler Ervin not running back situation.
Well, I think with Aaron Jones in, Tyler Ervin's a lot safer than Dexter Williams for sure, because he has that role as a slot receiver. And he could see the field, given that Allen Lazard continues to be out. He has been in on about 1/3 of the passing plays across the games he's been active. So he will have a role. I almost tout it, and that's why this dog is going crazy. But yeah, with Aaron Jones in, I think Dexter Williams could see the mop-up duty, but I'm really thinking that Aaron Jones will be their first, second down guy. Tyler Ervin may come in on the third down. So we can break that down a little bit in greater detail in a little bit. Guys, make sure to hit the thumbs up button. Appreciate that support a lot. And also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell that lets you know when we go on the air. I'm not really expecting an emergency only situation for Aaron Jones, because I feel like Devontae Adams had the same situation last week where he was healthy and they wouldn't let him play. And it probably, I can't remember who they're playing, but it had to be a bigger game than this. So the Packers did put healthy players on their inactives tonight. And I'm also thinking that is important to consider. So I'm considering Aaron Jones tonight. So Let's talk about the 49ers first, because they have a lot of unfamiliar faces in their lineup tonight. First, we got Nick Mullins. He's played in a couple of games so far this year because of Jimmy G injuries. Been pretty good, but I think his big game, he was throwing to George Kittle. Now he's throwing to Trent Taylor. So what do you make of Nick Mullins so far this season, and how do you expect that'll translate into the new lineup tonight?
Yeah, Nick Mullins has kind of sporadically at least been good, quite good, in fact, throughout his handful of starts. I think it's somewhere in the ballpark of like 12 or 13, or at least games in which he threw over like 20 pass attempts. He's been sporadically quite good. Like you talked about the one game he had, let me see his stat line here, 25 of 36. What is this? One touchdown, 343 yards. He actually has like a lot of games over 300 yards as well. I'm not sure if he's just like DGAF because he comes in as the backup and doesn't care, or if that's just his style of play. Now, like you said, I mean, who is he throwing to? His number one receiver is going to be Trent Taylor. The number two, probably Richie James. So I don't think we see as much of like the efficient, like surprisingly efficient Nick Mullins. But like, I mean, honestly, I don't think he's like an incredible downgrade. And like, from Jimmy Garoppolo. In fact, like Jimmy Garoppolo was pseudo bench. Like I know both times supposedly he was hurt, but I do think like it shouldn't be a terrible downgrade for this offense. I think the weapons more than anything. Losing George Kittle, like, you know, we talked about these guys, losing your top two receivers, both great yak producers, and George Kittle, arguably the best tight end, is really why this offense gets such a downgrade, not necessarily to drop to Nick Mullins.
Right, I agree with that completely. Nick Mullins, his big Achilles heel is the interceptions. He's had a very bad interception rate so far this season. In his career. But he's been pretty effective this year when he's been on the field. So we gotta think Nick Mullins is a decent option tonight. But he won't be nearly as effective throwing to the guys who are playing. What about the wide receivers? I know Trent Taylor is probably the guy that we can count on the most. Richie James, he's more of a deep threat, I think, and he also returns punts. So I'm really not feeling very confident about his role in the team now that he's going to have to play a lot more. And then we have a few call-ups. So how are you breaking down the wide receivers on the 49ers today?
I believe Trent Taylor is the only guy on this team to have more than, like, I think at all targets in the entire season. I'm not sure if Richie James has been targeted yet. He has been active in a few games, but I believe they were only returning games for him. So I think Trent Taylor, as like the only guy who has actually like NFL experience, at least in recent memory, is probably the obvious target. Like River Crawcraft or Rivers Crawcraft, I think it's River Crawcraft to be specific, could slot in. I think really the position you're looking at is number 3 receiver. I would imagine Richie James is probably the number 2 because unlike these other guys, he's not a practice squad player. So I think it's Crawcraft and probably like Kevin White who could like mix in as the number 3. Crawcraft does have like some career receiving production, but I believe it was in 2018 with Denver. Kevin White also does, but has kind of been washed around the league throughout his career essentially. So I would probably focus a lot on Trent Taylor in the most like, standard of just like looking at projections. After that, Richie James, volatile at best, potentially not seeing almost any work, at worst. I think maybe it's even more interesting to look at double running back and double tight end sets, because I would imagine this team, like Ross Dwelley actually played some games in lieu of like George Kittle last year, and Jordan Reed in his second and third week saw, I believe, 14 combined targets and had that sick 2 touchdown game. They have 2 running backs who and a fullback actually, who all have like more NFL experience than essentially any of their receivers. So I think it'd be surprising not to see a large portion of their snaps go to double running back or double tight end.
Yeah, that's a good point, where maybe we see less wide receivers today than the normal, just because they're adapting to their new personnel. So as far as okay, so they average 2.5 wide receiver routes per game or per snap drop back, and 1 tight end route. So I think we could see more Dwelley and Reed on the field at the same time. That's going to be a tough decision because Dwelley obviously a lot healthier. Jordan Reed, on the other hand, has been very effective when he's been on the field. So I'm kind of leaning towards Reed, but the snap count is very, very hard to predict. Dwelly has been targeted on 11.5% of routes this year, and Jordan Reed at 40%. So Jordan Reed is a lot higher upside, I'd say, but he's coming off a multi-week absence, and he has a pretty bad injury history as well. So what are you going to do with Jordan Reed tonight?
Unfortunately, I don't like. I'd be almost surprised if they have much of a choice in playing Jordan Reed. Essentially, even though, yeah, like you would not. I think it's sort of the Aaron Jones situation where they said that they would not prefer to have him active, but they really didn't have a choice with no backup. So he comes in and does what he does. I think the same thing probably happens with Jordan Reed, where if you're a coach, I think you have to largely assume that this is what you have, and you have to work with it for this game because you don't have many other choices. So, and like you said, Jordan Reed is like a very adept pass catcher. I've been told by EMAC, by the way, that I was saying Crawcraft, it's Craycraft. So I apologize to the Craycraft fans out there. I would imagine if I look in our YouTube chat, I'd be getting flamed for it because he has I would imagine a ton of fans. So anyway, I do think we see a lot of Jordan Reed specifically on passing downs, which is all that would matter. He runs a route, or he gets targeted on an incredible amount of his routes. He's essentially just a pass catching tight end at this point, and he's still pretty good at it, I believe. So I think they don't have any choice. I think we see a lot of Jordan Reed, and like you said, Ross Dwelly, more of viable, but like essentially kind of a mix of a blocker and a pass catching tight end.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to that game where they were saying Jordan Reed would play like 7 snaps or something, and then he had like 20 fantasy points or something crazy. So that's in the back of my head, being like, I can't fade this guy. And as you're saying, they have a need to get him on the field. So he seems like a pretty good option on a squad that is really beat up tonight. And the other guy we got to look at is JaMycal Hasty. He's the running back that got the most work last week. Jerick McKinnon and him should be the committee, although they did call up another guy with Tevin Coleman and Raheem Mostert out. That guy is Austin Walter. I just am assuming he's not going to play. Mm-hmm. So I think Hasty is one of the best plays on the 49ers. It's just like the game scripts could get out of hand very easily. So what's your take on Hasty?
Yeah, so I think Hasty handles like the vast majority of the between the tackles carries, and although, like you said, the game script definitely doesn't project to be very favorable for a between the tackles banger, I wouldn't be shocked to see them come out and try and just like play slow ball control, even from a deficit, because they have backup quarterback, two backup linemen, I believe, and all backup and like practice squad level receivers. So I think if there were a time for a coach to like irrationally run the ball when losing, like you could arguably say this would be one of those spots. So I still think you can make like a reasonable projection of Hasty getting a lot of work. And in the past 2 weeks, I believe we've seen 3 and 3 Jerick McKinnon carry games. I think both of them were negative yards too. They were kind of mop-up duty games. So it doesn't seem like they're really very comfortable using him in much outside of that like scat back style of role, which is interesting because he had like almost 20 touches in back-to-back games. And then it was the game after those, I believe, that they basically, like, they didn't make him inactive, but Kyle Shanahan said it was a rest game for him. So I think they've kind of signaled to us throughout the past 3 or 4 weeks that Jerick McKinnon is he's a role player, essentially, whereas JaMycal Hasty has at least 9 carries in the past 3 games. Not a ton of receiving work. I believe 2 targets in the past 3 games combined. But I expect him to get the vast majority of the between the tackles looks, and we could see those target numbers come up because they have to throw to somebody. So I don't love the game script for him. It could be a game where that simply doesn't matter. They just, like the Vikings do this all the time. They commit to the run even when they're losing. There's no reason that it can't happen in this game.
Yeah, I mean, Hasty was getting almost all the work last week. He got 63% of rushing attempts. Jerick McKinnon only saw 21%. So I think it's clear now they prefer Hasty, but man, I'm still tilting because I thought McKinnon would be this role player, but then right after Raheem Mostert went down, all of a sudden McKinnon is getting like crazy workload. So it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world to see McKinnon play more than we're expecting. Yeah. So that could be one potential way you could predict a different game script tonight. So let's first thing I mentioned, our sponsor, No House Advantage. No House Advantage is perfect for prop lovers because you get to bet props except against other people instead of the house. And beating Joe Schmo is a lot easier than beating the house. You play DFS style contests whoever wins gets the vast majority of the prize pool. So it's the format you're familiar with. And you can get $20 free if you use the promo code Awesemo. And I never mind a free $20. That's a nice little bankroll booster. And I know some of the guys on the site have been having a lot of success on No House Advantage, so check them out. Let's talk about some props real quick. So I know House Advantage, what is one prop you're looking at tonight?
As always, we have props on these like basically passing touchdown, passing interception ones, because it's just it's difficult to, when you're not getting raked over the coals with actual rake, it's difficult to make a line that isn't going to have an edge on one side or the other. And interestingly, we have both unders, under interceptions at 0.5 and under touchdowns for Aaron Rodgers at, I believe, 2.5. We have unders on both of those. And I think they both have a certain amount of correlation too, in the sense of either one of those could just hit. Specifically, our interceptions prop is one of the more advantageous props we have on this slate. I think it actually, it's behind another interceptions prop. So, but Aaron Rodgers, I just think both of his props for touchdowns and interceptions, this could be a game where they're massive favorites and they don't have to pass the ball a lot, because we don't expect these poor 49ers to score many points. And just generally, we have a lot of edge in these specific props, the interceptions and even passing touchdowns. Tonight is no different.
Nice. Yeah, I agree with that. I know House Advantage one I'm liking is, for some reason, they just love Jay Sternberger, and his prop is 24 or something, and that guy barely plays. So I'm definitely taking the under on Jay Sternberger there. Now let's talk about some sports books. Man, I've been getting limited a little bit because I guess I was winning my bets too much. So make sure to check out our NFL props tool and Odd Shopper as well, so you can find the best lines for each of them. What's one sportsbook prop that you're liking today?
So I found 219, which is right in line with our projection. I guess maybe I'm just betting the over on our projection too. 219 for Nick Mullins passing yards. I just think it's kind of interesting that people are really sportsbooks, and it's understandable, but I don't think he's that much different than Jimmy Garoppolo, and he's in spots played better. And the interceptions, although not great for him, are more of a fantasy or real life factor than they are for his passing props, so they do cut down on his total drives, or at least the length of the drives. But I think Nick Mullins is actually decent, so I'm gonna bet his over 219 on DK Sportsbook.
Nice, man. I like it. It's a bold call. He's averaged a lot of yards per attempt, 8 around it, I think. So if you add that up in a game script that he's gonna have to pass, I think that he could easily get to above 219. I'm just worried that the guys he's passing to won't be able to make it happen for him. So one of the ones I'm really liking, I think you mentioned Aaron Rodgers for your No House Advantage one. I'm leaning towards the under for complete. Oh, wait. Scratch this. I'm not sure what's going on with that on my props tool here. So I bet the under on completions for Aaron Rodgers, and the line is 26.5. There's some juice on the under, but I found that one. I'm not expecting that kind of passing volume. He basically have to pass 36 times or more to hit 27 completions, and against a team in San Francisco that they have a decent pass defense, first of all, and then also they don't really have much offense going. So I'm thinking that Aaron Rodgers might not have to pass that much tonight. All right, let's talk about the Packers here. We mentioned a little bit about the running backs. Let's talk about the wideouts. Alan Lazard, there's some speculation that he could be active tonight, but he's not. So it's just the usual cast of characters, with Devontae Adams being far and away number one, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling being a guy that we can pin our hopes on every week and get disappointed. So how are you feeling the Packers wideouts tonight?
Miserable, because I know I'm playing Marquez Valdes-Scantling again. Every slate I wake up and know I'm playing Marquez Valdes-Scantling is a brutal one, because he was at least before last week, he was, I believe, top 10 in air yard share, and right now he's still top 10 in unrealized air yards. These past 2 weeks, his volume has come down with Devontae Adams, but Devontae Adams can't be, although he might argue with me on this, can't be the entirety of the offense. He can be close, but Marquez Valdes-Scantling is one of the highest ADOT receivers in the league that actually gets a decent role. he just doesn't ever capitalize on it. But in my heart of hearts, I truly believe that if he keeps getting these air yards, one day it will pay off. So I think in the largest field tournaments, like he'd be a really cheeky, interesting play at captain because he has incredible upside at a fairly cheap price. And in smaller terms, I think I'd probably mostly focus on him at the flex. But I do have an uncomfortable amount of Marquez Valdes-Scantling on this slate because his production is simply not in line with his volume, and it isn't in line with his price either. Or his volume isn't in line with his price. So I think like the box score scouts will see that he hasn't done anything and not go to him, but we know that he gets at least they attempt to get him the ball a lot. Does it work out? Rarely, but I'm going to keep betting on volume until it's not there. And obviously it's a major change or a major bonus that Alan Lazard is out. Had Alan Lazard been in, I probably wouldn't be doing this as much.
I like it, man. I made a tweet about Marquez Valdes-Scantling earlier, and I was like, I bet the under, but now Alan Lazard is out, so I was regretting it a little bit because there's only 2.5 receptions I bet the under on. So the responses were all like, MVS sucks. He won't get 3 receptions anyway. So if people don't like guys in the NFL, they're not going to roster him usually, except for, more advanced players, which in the larger field tournaments don't make up a huge part of the player pool. So I think Marquez Valdes-Scantling is pretty intriguing there.
Yeah.
As far as maybe third options on the Packers, like they have they have Malik Taylor, Darius Shepard seeing some snaps, as well as Equanimeous St. Brown. None of them are playing a ton, though, so I'm not playing any of those guys for the most part. Is there any love for a deep flyer on one of those?
Not really. I don't know if you made me pick one to be Malik Taylor, but I think I think I'd rather just take my punts on the idea that what if Kevin White steps in and ends up being like an every down player? Like what if they keep, Richie James like a rotational player and Kevin White or, Rivers Craycraft steps in? I think those are better contrarian punts, even though they'll be more owned than a Malik Taylor, I would assume. I still think they are like better plays relative to their ownership than a guy like, Malik Taylor or Darius Shepard would be. And they would give you decent leverage off like a Trent Taylor too. So in larger tournaments, even still, I'm probably not looking too much at these deep Packers players specifically.
Yeah, I think maybe one lineup at most, but not much to find there. And then the tight end, Tanyan has been crazy efficient. His playing time hasn't been great, but we know he's had some huge games. Do you think you're going to have Tanyan?
Yeah, he's totally fine. I think he's fine. He's perfectly fine. Like you said, he's been crazy efficient, but maybe not to be like to this extent is probably over the expectation. But players with Aaron Rodgers on the field probably should be at least above average efficiency. He's perfectly fine. He probably needs to find the end zone or I guess just catch a lot of balls and have a relatively low scoring game. So I think assuming like he probably does have to catch a touchdown to make the optimal lineup, I'm exclusively playing him with Aaron Rodgers, I think. But I totally wouldn't like X Matt or anything. He's fine. I'm not going crazy on him, though.
Nice. Yeah, he stands out as a guy that maybe people will see his average fantasy points per game at 14 and just overvalue him. So I'm kind of off of it. But, he does have that upside that really can break a slate, as we've seen already this season. And you mentioned it in Kevin White. I kind of glossed over the San Francisco wideouts. So let's circle back a little bit. Kevin White is a guy that he was drafted real high by the Bears. He's been super injured in his whole career. I think the latest year for the Bears, he broke his leg or something and he's out the season. So, he's got talent, or he did at one point. Do you have any read on, if he's still got any value?
Value, yeah, he has some value on this slate because he could realistically step in as the number 3 receiver. And I think if it were between him and Rivers Craycraft, I would say I'd probably give the most modest of leans to Kevin White because he has been active at multiple points this year. I think it's his 3rd time getting pulled from the practice squad back on the team. Because I saw something about the rules are they have to now keep him on the active roster essentially. So he's been out there. He has, I think 3 snaps at actual wide receiver. Most of his stuff has been special teams, but he's not completely inactive. He's a practice squad player, but he's been an active player for them too. And he did have some semblance of draft capital at some point and some semblance of talent at some point. So I think of all of the like really punt plays on the San Francisco side, he's probably my favorite contrarian one. Like obviously Trent Taylor is the best raw play, I think, because he's the only, like him and Richie James, who's basically a special teamer, like are the only active or formerly active players for the team. Before this game, the rest are practice squad. So Trent Taylor being the only one with a target, the best play. But I think Kevin White, interesting contrarian play, would be a really solid contrarian play if you played him without Trent Taylor, just hoping that he gets like somehow outproduces Trent Taylor. It's certainly possible. I don't think we know a ton about what's going to happen. So I think Kevin White is probably my preferred of the non-Trent Taylor San Francisco receivers, but like the softest of leans, because it's difficult to really predict what's going to happen here.
Yeah, I agree. I think Kevin White is maybe the best guy other than Trent Taylor. I mean, Richie James, I feel like we can be pretty certain he's going to see the field a decent amount. But I do think Kevin White has a little bit more upside, although I'm not super familiar with her craycraft, to be honest. So it's hard for me to really weigh in too heavy there. I'm going through some lineups here, and I'm seeing Aaron Jones in 70% of them, and now I'm kind of feeling like maybe that's too heavy. I'm sure a lot of people in chat are wondering if Aaron Jones is a good play. So let's talk about that a little bit more. I'm going to mull it over a little bit more. But what is the chance you think he doesn't play much tonight?
The chance he doesn't play much is like small. I guess like define much. Give me like a snapshot and I'll call an over under. Because like much for Aaron Jones, like he plays a lot. So I think he probably plays less so than normal, but I still think he is like a part of the offense. I think he just looks more like a committee back this week. But like committee back Aaron Jones can still score 2 touchdowns. And he's like kind of been a committee back anyways. Jamal Williams would come on for the field and get some pass catching downs. I think potentially we get more of a threat that other backs come in, but they don't have great other backs. I think your biggest worry essentially is that they have a big lead. And I do think if they have like a multi-touchdown lead in the second half, Aaron Jones could straight be pulled because like the team said it, like I heard a beat reporter said it. I think that like he normally wouldn't be playing tonight given his health, but he's healthy enough. So they put him out on the field and, you know, they put him out on the field to use him. I don't think he would be like active if they didn't play and use him a little bit. So I think we still see enough of him that he is certainly in play, and this could definitely temper his ownership. Maybe that's why that's your angle, is that you get Aaron Jones at potentially lower than he should be owned. But in the fourth quarter, if we didn't see a single snap from Aaron Jones, it would not surprise me in the least. Obviously, that only assumes that, you know, the Packers probably leading in the fourth quarter by a lot. Yeah,
so I agree. I think Dexter Williams probably sees some mop-up duty in that case. Anytime you're like, if they're up multiple touchdowns, he won't play. Like, you got to think that his production in that scenario would be a lot higher than average up to that point in the game. So I don't think there's any reason to be too scared. So I'm thinking, I guess I'm going to roll with this amount of Aaron Jones. Maybe I'm going to scan Twitter and see if there's any insight from the beat writers. But I agree. I think like they is this like, why would they make him active if they weren't going to use him? Because it's not, I don't know if they really need like an emergency running back. Like it's hard to imagine that like Dexter Williams gets injured, Tyler Irvin gets injured, and then like they play Aaron Jones because they have to. Like you'd think they'd just put in a different guy. So that's kind of how I'm feeling about it. There was one guy I didn't get to in our 49ers deep dive here that I feel like we got to talk about just a little bit at least, which is Kyle Juszczyk.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a favorite in Showdown because we never get to roster him in a full slate, and he does have Showdown winning upside. So, any love for Juszczyk?
Yeah, I like Kyle Juszczyk. I like him. I like him in the context of a Showdown slate where there are a lot of players who could be getting on the field more. And he's averaging like 2 targets per game, and I think just under a carry per game, which like these numbers are not great, but they're not insignificant. And all of them come in the context of this team having, you know, relative levels of healthy players active. Like it wouldn't surprise me, especially if they're just like looking to put guys on the field. They love Kyle Juszczyk. They get him on the field a decent amount. One of the most used fullbacks, at least. It's a dwindling position, but one of the more used fullbacks in the league. He has some pass catching upside, and ironically, he is like one of the most efficient pass catchers in the NFL. I think it's one, it's because typically he has a very high ADOT because he just runs these actually deep-ish for a running back, these like deep like boot style routes. So he has like an interesting amount of upside. I still think he doesn't project as well as like, your guys like Trent Taylor. He's probably more in like the Dexter Williams range where it does take like an interesting outcome for him to have a good game, but it's not impossible. And I think he'll probably go overlooked to the likes of Trent Taylor and maybe Richie James. I'm not really sure what people are going to think of Richie James. I can imagine people are going to play a lot of Trent Taylor.
Yeah, Trent Taylor is definitely one of the top plays of the slate. I think it's just like, how do you fade a guy that's 400 and the number one wide receiver? But we do see wide receiver is a volatile position. You're going to need like 10 points out of whoever is your punt, I think. So whoever is the highest scoring one between him and Richie James, Craycraft, Kevin White, you're going to probably need. So there is some game theory going in there because Trent Taylor is the obvious option. So that'll be interesting tonight. All right, guys, we got a special giveaway tonight, so make sure to check out the pinned tweet on Awesemo.com. You just have to predict whether Aaron Rodgers or Nick Mullins will throw for more yards. I don't know if that will be hard. So one random winner will be selected. So go to Awesemo_com, and you can also check us out on Instagram at Awesemo_com. So make sure to participate in that because free month that's decent. Let's talk about some game scripts here. So I think the obvious game script is that Green Bay dominates the game and Aaron Rodgers throws for some touchdowns and they run it out. Who would you be putting in that lineup? I mean, you can fit pretty much anyone with these punt plays. Like you could get all three Packers main stars. So this one's tough for me. Who would you be looking to?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of obvious. I think there are the three obvious options in Rodgers, Devontae, and Aaron Jones. I would say I wouldn't feel like great relative to the field, at least. Like obviously Rodgers is a good play. I wouldn't feel great relative to the field though about playing him at captain, only if because the market share numbers Devontae Adams is seeing is unreal, absolutely unreal. So likely, and not certainly not impossible, but the most likely outcome, the median outcome, is that if Aaron Rodgers has a good game, Devontae Adams has like a borderline great game, as he does so often. So certainly he could throw a touchdown to Robert. He could throw 3 touchdowns to Robert Tonyan. He could throw a touchdown to him. He could throw a touchdown to Scantling. And if he spreads it out like that, he also has a little bit of rushing equity. If he spreads it out like that, he can certainly be the optimal captain. But given the market share numbers we're seeing from Devontae Adams, the two are probably so correlated that a Devontae Adams, like a Rodgers good game is Devontae Adams good game. And at that point, it's probably a better game. So I think I'd probably prefer Devontae to Rodgers. Not that Rodgers is a bad play. Aaron Jones, like you said, if your worry is that the team gets up early, it's a good, not great chance that Aaron Jones has been involved in some way because he scores a lot of touchdowns for this team. He gets a decent amount of looks in the red zone, and they have no one else to, realistically, if they want to use him that way, no one else to give the ball to outside of him. There's no Jamal Williams who's a good pass catcher. So I think those are the three obvious plays. Like I said, Marquez Valdez-Scantling in the biggest tournaments gets a lot of air yards, goes very deep, needs 3 targets to get it done. He never wants to capitalize on those air yards. I played him 3 or 4 weeks in a row, just jamming him in. It doesn't seem to matter. He doesn't seem to care how many lineups I play him in, but I will continue to do it at least a little bit in the largest tournaments. And outside of that, I think maybe one final interesting way you could approach this team is the double running back, especially if you're Captain Aaron Jones. Would it be surprising if Aaron Jones scored multiple times and that is what gave them the breathing room to get Dexter Williams involved? No, I don't think that would surprise me, but I think people generally wouldn't want to play both of them because this idea is that, Dexter Williams cuts into Aaron Jones' role. Maybe, but also it just maybe means that Aaron Jones had a good game. So I think if it's going to be relatively unpopular, I think Dexter Williams would be the mop-up back. I think maybe if they're trying to mix in, I think maybe Tyler Ervin mixes in more in a neutral game script essentially, but we might not see a neutral game script. So double running back could be a way to get interesting. Marquez Valdez-Scantling at captain, another way to get interesting outside of the obvious 3 plays.
Okay, yeah, I think Dexter Williams, if we're pretty confident he's going to get a role, then putting him in, if we're expecting a lot of rushing attempts from Green Bay, makes a lot of sense. I'll throw some love to Mason Crosby. Today, there's so many really cheap value plays like Trent Taylor, pretty much everyone on the 49ers that one of my contrarian builds is not punting. And I feel like everyone's going to be taking like $200 players. If my cheapest players are Mason Crosby and maybe the Packers defense, then I might have a unique kind of build. So that's something I'm thinking about. Another option is maybe we play for 49ers to overperform here. So that's going to be an interesting tournament strategy. We're kind of talking about this game like it's the Jets versus Kansas City the other day, but the spread in this game is only 7. The sportsbooks are projecting 49ers have a 25% chance to win about. That's not bad. There's definitely a decent chance they could run away with the game. So how are you going to handle that as far as your DFS lineups?
Yeah, I agree. Maybe you should give a little bit more love. I mean, it's weird. Jimmy Garoppolo goes out and then all these other players go out. Nick Mullins comes in. The sportsbook say, oh, like touchdown spread. Maybe that says something about Jimmy Garoppolo. Maybe it says something about Nick Mullins. Who knows? No way to tell. No, I don't know. I think there's definitely a real possibility. Like you said, sportsbooks have about a 20% chance, 1 in 5 chance that this team comes out and keeps it close and wins. So I do think that there should be lineups built. At least there might not be many, but I think there should be in your portfolio lineups built on the premise, if you're playing in large field tournaments, obviously, that the 49ers really not run away with it. They just end up outperforming expectations by a standard deviation or two, which in my mind, I think there is probably a very realistic scenario. And we've seen like more so than almost any other team outside of maybe like the Titans, this team like actually does run at like an above average efficiency rate year in and year out. And I think there is some semblance to the fact that Kyle Shanahan is probably just really good at scheming up a good run game, and he uses like different zone blocking and I believe like pre-snap motion, all these things that actually do like marginally improve your efficiency metrics. He uses them like above average rate. So I wouldn't be surprised to see like a long run from JaMychal Hasty or a long run from like a Jerick McKinnon or a long Jerick McKinnon catch. So I think that sort of high variance outcome is not out of the range of outcomes and would set them up well to be contending in this game. So I think if they're contending, it's probably off of like spiky running efficiency, which maybe not like predictable, but we're not trying to predict it happening. We're trying to predict it happening versus the odds of the field thinking it happens.
Right. I think that the 49ers rushing is really their number one weapon, and they're one of the more run heavy teams in the league at 45%. When I just factor in only neutral game scripts, so I think that that gives JaMychal Hasty a lot of upside as their number one back. I want to mention Fantasy Sharpie. Thank you for the report here. He says, from Tom Silverstein live blog, Aaron Jones is active and Fox is reporting he will play. It's not just for emergency purposes.
Okay.
So his 2-game absence is over. So I feel like if that is true, then a lot of people might not be on Aaron Jones, given that there's this concern. He's been questionable. He hasn't played in a few weeks. Does that make you want to go over on Aaron Jones?
Yeah, let me see. What do we have him owned at captain? Let me pull up it. It shows in the top stack tool. So if this is up to date, which it should be, no reason it wouldn't be, our top stacks tool, which is like a good place, at least in my opinion, is like a good place to start just figuring out where there could be leverage on the slate, has Aaron Jones as the top captain, roughly, 11% of the time. Whereas the field doesn't look to be even at 10% on him. We know, like, it kind of reminds me of Dalvin Cook. We saw Dalvin Cook come back from injury. Is this last week? Yeah, last week already. Came back from injury, and there were potentially, like, there were other good options on the slate, but there were people really convinced that, I mean, the field was quite convinced that Dalvin Cook didn't have this crazy touchdown upside, which he, like, was scoring at over a touchdown per game before coming into this 3-touchdown game. Aaron Jones, similar, like spiky efficiency where he just continues to score touchdowns. He's involved as a pass catcher, but people are certainly going to be scared off. No, not only because I think it's just harder to roster a player when we haven't seen him in 2 or 3 weeks, but also because we didn't know he was going to play up until, a few hours before, essentially. So I do think there's some leverage in playing a guy who scores a ton of fantasy points at captain when people aren't going to do it. It's kind of that simple. There's certainly risk, but in tournaments, like the risk be damned. I don't care.
Yeah, I think Jones could be sneaky now. I'm afraid to take too hard of a stand here because, there's definitely a way this goes wrong. News God in chat, thank you for chiming in here. He's saying Glazer's saying Jones should see a lot of touches on Fox, he's not sure if he buys it. I mean, we gotta keep in mind these talking heads aren't always right. I was especially frustrated the other Showdown slate when they were like Sterling Shepard is going to be limited. He played like every snap.
Yep, so I remember that.
These guys, they're just kind of speculating, but I think there is some incontrovertible evidence that Aaron Jones won't just be an emergency running back, given that there are healthy players that are inactive, and just the Green Bay Packers' tendencies to not have guys that are even slightly injured active. It makes me think that maybe the injury is not as bad as people are making it out to be. So I feel good about Aaron Jones. In GPPs, I probably wouldn't recommend him in cash. As I say that, I'm seeing he's in all my cash lineups. So let me take a look at that. But so we got an interesting question in chat here. They were saying, should we play McKinnon and Hasty in the same lineup? That was. I'm trying to find who asked that because I kind of lost it in the scroll here. So sorry for not calling that. But all right, so will you put Hasty and McKinnon in the same lineup?
I mean, yeah, you can definitely do that. It's not impossible. We've seen on a few slates this year, double running back bring it down. Like they're not quite the super cheap running back. Like a lot of times it's been like a Latavius Murray who always seems to be underpriced relative to his volume. It's not quite the case we're looking at here, but I think it's certainly possible. Wouldn't surprise me if they were able to come out with a run heavy script, at least in the first half. Maybe they keep it close. Like you said, it's 7 points. It's not like the 20-point spread that we saw with the Chiefs Jets or whatever. So it wouldn't be impossible to see them come out run heavy. We know that they have like explosive upside on their rushes, at least more so than your average team. And McKinnon could also play a role that doesn't necessarily overlap because he should be, or at least he's been used in the past as essentially a third down back. So I think you definitely can do it. I wouldn't be going like crazy over it because like it's not the ideal game to have two of their running backs as 7-point dogs do it, but it will be less popular than maybe it should be. Like I said, the same thing. I just think double running back is probably less popular, in especially in low stakes. I would imagine when you don't have as sharp players. I think it's probably less popular than it actually has of hitting, which I think it has a pretty solid chance of hitting.
Nice. Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think that if the 49ers rush a lot of times, you probably see both guys mix in a good amount. Plus McKinnon has that ability to maybe play some third downs and get some big plays. So I think that combo does make sense. I think there's a lot of game scripts where that could pay off. All right, let me see what else people are talking about in chat here. Let's talk about favorite captains real quick. Who would stand out to you as a good captain play? And let's do three. Let's do, first of all, the millionaire maker. Let's do a midfield tournament. I'll say like 5,000 people, and let's do a small field tournament.
Okay, so I like this strategy. I like this approach to talking about it too, because these tournaments are so wildly different when you talk about playing in your 100, 500 mans, your few thousand people, and your milli makers. In your milli maker, I think both of the running backs are really interesting right now. Like our top sack school really loves JaMychal Hasty, and it's probably because his market share numbers, like we talked about earlier, he appears to be operating as the lead back, and I think there is like a tentative downside that, like you said, we saw Jerick McKinnon kind of play that same role, and then all of a sudden he comes out and gets nothing. So there is a tentative downside to that, but like I said, I don't really care about the downside, and I think he's going to go, I think all of the 49ers, at least the ones that aren't like named Trent Taylor essentially, are going to go well under owned relative to their odds of like keeping this game close and scoring touchdowns. Like definitely they're underdogs by a touchdown. That doesn't give them a great chance of winning, but I think the odds of them at least keeping it close are not being reflected correctly in our captain ownership specifically, but probably throughout the flex outside of like the obvious, Trent Taylor value or whatever. So I would go JaMychal Hasty, although I don't think Aaron Jones, like those two would be up there for me in terms of the milli maker style plays. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, I guess, gets a shout out there as well, although he's totally just going to take my money away. So moving on to these like mid to low stakes, I think we still have an edge in a guy like Davante Adams right now, where the field just doesn't seem to really appreciate how incredible his market share numbers are, how like dominant he is at scoring touchdowns, even when they don't throw like very efficiently, like we saw last week, still scores 3 touchdowns. So I think as you move into those stakes, I'd probably look to someone like Davante Adams. If I'm playing like 100 or 500 man, I'd probably go with like a close to a cash build, which I'm probably putting Aaron Rodgers at captain in my cash games, because there is like an off chance that Aaron Jones, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Robert Tonyan even catch the touchdowns. And at that point, Rodgers does outscore Davante Adams. So I'd probably go like Rodgers to Adams and then try and make like one pivot. Potentially can move off of Trent Taylor. I think also just like playing Marquez Valdes-Scantling is going to be very unpopular, probably because he doesn't produce a lot of fantasy points. But just putting him in the flex with like a Rodgers captain would probably be for like my 100 and 500 mans. But him and Davante are probably both right in the mix there. So either one of those guys is fine. I guess I'll throw this one back to you. Any interest in Nick Mullins, captain? He has these like spiky games, but it doesn't set up to be a very good one for him. I don't know. I think it's at least worth talking about. I don't think we've talked about it. So that's, a thing.
I like him on FanDuel where quarterbacks are valued higher. On DraftKings, I'm not seeing him a lot. I feel, it's tough because it's hard to captain a San Francisco wide receiver or tight end. Although there's an interesting report from Giannis. He says that warmups show likely starters McKinnon, Hasty, Richie James, and Craycraft. But wait, that doesn't make any sense. Anyway, I'll try to find out some more info there. I think I'm more into Hasty at captain than Mullins. It's just kind of I think I can't remember Mullins' price point, but Hasty I feel like has a better chance because San Francisco is a run first team. I'm really worried about Nick Mullins' efficiency given the quality of the receiving targets. So it's kind of where I'm leaning. My favorite captain, this isn't going to be a surprise to anyone, is Davante Adams. I don't think you need to really go crazy this slate. And if you pick him, it's all about how you fill out the rest of your lineup, where you don't just jam in all the max salary. I'd probably leave a little bit on the table. But Aaron Jones, I think, is an intriguing captain option. Packers defense, Rodgers. I think you got a lot of options here. Machiavelli says MVS equals suicide. I mean, that's why no one's going to be on him. So, it doesn't matter if he's good. It just matters if he gets a touchdown and 50 yards, So, if Mullins at MVP, how many pass catchers would he want with him? I'd say at least one on FanDuel, I guess, because you only get 5 spots. So you don't necessarily need to, but 2 would be fine. All right. Bra says Jordan Reed might have a night.
That is certainly an accurate statement. Jordan Reed might have a night.
That's true, yeah. What about FanDuel? Who would be your favorite captains on FanDuel?
Yeah, favorite captains on FanDuel. I kind of agree. It's a difficult slate to do anything too weird because we have just such good numbers on these Packers side. So Rodgers, I think Hasty is interesting there. Maybe again another spot where running backs get more of an advantage on FanDuel, but will people still be concerned with playing Aaron Jones? So maybe he's sort of the contrarian tournament plays that people know who Aaron Jones is, but it would be, if there were a game where we'd see lowered ownership relative to his probably the same as always ceiling, this would be one. So in tournaments, I think Aaron Jones, at least in the largest tournaments, in the smaller tournaments, I'm playing a lot of Rodgers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these injuries make a huge difference in ownership. I saw it this morning in golf where Dustin Johnson was coming off COVID and he was 2/3 as owned as I thought he would be, even though he's fully recovered. So, I mean, Aaron Jones, not the exact same situation, but if you take Aaron Jones ownership and captain and flex, and then you half it from normal, that's kind of what I'm expecting tonight. So I think he may be very low owned. Of course, the risk is there too that he might not play a ton. So yeah, I hope that you get lucky there. Let's take some questions here in chat. Chris Foster says, what about Dwelly? Is he a play? Kyle, how are you feeling about Ross Dwelly for the 49ers?
Yeah, he's in play, but I do think if there's a tight end on the team that is going to do the bulk of the pass catching, it would be Jordan Reed. So, you can play Ross Dwelly. I think 2 tight end makes more sense on this, like for this team in this context than, I don't know, any other team outside of like the Eagles in recent weeks. Other than that, no, I think I'd probably prefer to go Jordan Reed, even at, given the obvious price hike to go to Jordan Reed. Dwelly, not like Xing him out. He's in play. A lot of guys are in play, but I actually think Reed is like a solid play where Dwelly is just like a large field tournament punt type play.
Yeah. I think the way Dwelly gets there is if Jordan Reed just doesn't play as much as we're hoping. Yeah. And I mean, he hasn't been targeted a lot this year, but he had some moments last year. And the fact that everyone's injured, maybe that increases his target share from the baseline. So I think Dwelly is definitely in the mix, although compared to some guys that are like seriously underpriced, like Trent Taylor, doesn't stand out as a great play. Antoine Murphy says, don't sleep on Sternberger. I have to admit, I'm sleeping on him. How are you feeling about Sternberger?
No, I agree. I had looked right at the quarterback props and no house advantage. And yeah, the Sternberger love seems a bit crazy to me. Doesn't really like just kind of a backup tight end. Backup tight ends can get there on a given slate. But like if there were a slate where like this is not a slate that I'm really looking to play like the weird off the field Malik Taylor's, because you can just play Kevin White and have a chance that Kevin White is like a number 2-3 receiver. The same with like, Craycraft or whatever. So I think you get a lot of like, very speculative upside by going to these guys. Like to say, you could argue the same for Dexter Williams, especially if he gets a lot of second half snaps. Whereas like, I don't think Jay Sternberg has that like theoretical upside where he could just be like a starting level player, where like Kevin White could almost be a starting level player. So, I don't have too much interest in him.
Yeah. So if we're looking at the snap counts, last week Sternberger played 32% of dropbacks. The previous week is 17%, so he did see a little bit of a bump there, but definitely a deep dive there for Sternberger. And then in chat, Better Life says, what about Malik Taylor? I feel like he's in the same boat here. I have a couple of shares of these guys in the Millie Maker, but Malik Taylor, he played 24%. He ran routes on 24% of dropbacks last week, 11% the week before. Seems like Equanimous St. Brown coming back may impact his work. Any love for Malik Taylor?
Yeah, not outside of the Millie Maker. I'm not playing the Millie Maker tonight, so I don't think I have any Malik Taylor right now.
Yeah. AJ says, how are you feeling about Tyler Ervin? I think with Aaron Jones, I'm feeling good that, he's going to play and he's good value given that he was probably going to play regardless. And now there's just a little bit more work with Jamal Williams out, but I don't think he's essential at all. How are you feeling about Ervin?
Yeah, I don't feel like he's essential. And I don't think, like I said earlier, I don't see him playing a ton of running back, given that they have two, relatively healthy, at least in Aaron Jones, actual running backs where they did like completely transition him. He has 120 snaps in the year, which is not insignificant. They're getting him on the field. But like you said, he's a slot receiver, essentially. He's a slot receiver who at one point in his career played running back, has 4 snaps at running back this year. So if like, in a scenario where like Aaron Jones was like magically, like it doesn't seem like this is the case at all. I'm not assuming this is happening. I'm actually upping my Aaron Jones as we speak. But if Aaron Jones were to be an emergency back, that's when you would have seen Tyler Ervin. It doesn't seem like it's going to be the case. So I think if they have 2 running backs on their roster and one guy who's essentially receiver, I think he stays at receiver. So I don't have much love right now for Tyler Ervin, given that we've kind of come around on Aaron Jones throughout the show.
Yeah, I feel like he might be playing running back on the third downs because Jamal Williams being out as well as A.J. Dillon. And I feel like Aaron Jones, they might give him a breather on those downs. So like I said, it all depends how you feel like Dexter Williams is going to fit in the rotation here. So, all right, Green Grippa, this question I love. He's asking, are we going double kicker? I mean, I think tonight, everyone's going to jam in the $200 guys to go and double kicker. Maybe you have a really unique lineup. But we know kicker isn't the most exciting position, so that's a big caveat. Would you consider double kicker?
I probably wouldn't be super interested in double kicker on the slate. I think I like more what you said earlier, playing like just going Packers heavy, but playing like a Crosby, or, you could run it back with Gold, but paying like Packers defense and Crosby and not going with the punt. But I do think maybe this is in the right vein of the questions we should be asking. Like, can you play a lot of the guys in the mid-range and ignore the cheap plays, ignore your Trent Taylors? Absolutely, because there are obviously scenarios. Like I harken back to the Tyler Johnson slate where I just absolutely jammed Tyler Johnson. And like his 10 points were the best, the best points per dollar value on the slate. I'm sure of it because he was 200 and a number 3 receiver. And it just didn't matter. Like the optimal build had like a Jimmy Graham outscoring him because you didn't have to use all the salary, which is sometimes the case. You don't like have to play all the best plays and someone cheap to fit them in. So it is possible that the optimal roster construction just features like a lot of the middle range guys. The middle range does well. You fit them in with some of the top guys. And, if you're doing that and it works, you're up there, you're live for the millie because like Trent Taylor is going to be massively owned. A lot of these cheap guys are going to get tons of ownership. So although double kicker maybe isn't the way I would approach it, I do think the roster construction that would have you on would be incredibly unique when the odds of it hitting aren't that low. Like certainly it's possible.
Yeah, I agree. I have some double kicker lineups. I don't think like there's any correlation between the opposing kickers. So I'm not really worried about it being a bad like a roster construction. But I do think that stacking up one team may be advantageous, and pairing defense and kicker might be a little bit easier way to build a winning lineup. But if you love kickers, you're probably the only one. So in the chat, I'd say go for it. Jordan says, who do you like better, Kevin White or Richie James? I mean, that's so tough. I don't know like these really deep wide receivers on the 49ers very well. Kyle, what's your lean between White and James?
So James, I believe in the past 2 years has actually gotten, it's like where it's in the context of all the players we have to talk about, has actually gotten some run. Not this season, really. I don't think he has any targets, but in the past few years, he has I think he had over 200 yards last year and over 100 yards the year before that. They haven't had to use him in that way at all to this point. But I would say if we're just looking at which one projects to be on the field and running routes more, it would still be the guy who has been who is the active roster player. Like he's the guy who's not on the practice squad. So I will lean with both his production for the team the past 2 years, which is it's obviously not a lot. None of them have a lot of production. So I would lean Richie James. I certainly actually have some exposure to Kevin White, though, probably over the field. Richie James will be on the field more, probably get more targets, but does that preclude Kevin White from coming in on 3 receiver sets and catching a touchdown? Absolutely not. I think both are good plays and both make interesting leverage off Trent Taylor in largest fields, because it could be that just like they produce similarly to Trent Taylor catches a ball or two more, but he doesn't catch the touchdown. So I like Richie James over Kevin White. I like both of them versus the field, though.
Nice. Yeah, I think Richie James, he's the regular for the 49ers. I'm just worried that he's more of a special teams guy. So I don't feel real strongly about White versus James. I think they're both fine. Eric Johnson in chat, he's just trolling us, man. He's like, love for Kyle Juszczyk at captain. Now he's asking, any CJ Beathard love? So I don't know if we need to answer that, but we saw Jimmy G get benched. It's not impossible. But I feel like the 49ers at this point in the season must be getting close to giving up. So I don't know. Josh also asked, do you have any Juszczyk at captain tonight? So, maybe this is something real people are thinking about. What do you think?
You can play him in the millie. He certainly is live for a touchdown, like we've seen it happen before. Did he do it in the Super Bowl? Was it the Super Bowl that he ended up being? I'm sure he wasn't captain in the Super Bowl, but did he catch a touchdown there?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's always live for a touchdown because he's on the field a decent amount. He gets some looks. It's not a lot, but I do think his overall volume is just so incredibly capped to 4 touches, and on a slate where you're not dying to you play a lot of Packers and that's it. So you're not dying for value, essentially. You don't need to play a cheap guy at captain to find good rosters. So no, I wouldn't do it. Although, you can do anything weird in the million. It could certainly pay off. I would just say out of all of the cheap plays, his volume is what's the max touches he could get? 4 or 5, barring more running back injuries, which is possible. But I think maybe there are better weird punt plays at captain.
Yeah, but 4 touchdown upside if he gets 4 touches. So
That's true.
I do have some Juszczyk in the flex, but I mean, like, I think it might be getting too cute because the way the cheap salary guys are in the winning lineup of captain is you fit in like crazy studs around them, but there's so many cheap guys tonight that picking Trent Taylor is going to improve your odds so much over Juszczyk because he's just going to be on the field a lot more. So that I think might be digging too deep there. But if you're just building a lineup for fun, like that's what the name of the game is. So, all right, it looks like we're locked here. So, any final thoughts about tonight's slate?
Yeah, let's get some JaMycal Hasty tonight. He's a committee back at Baylor, I think, but now he's the lead back on an NFL franchise. Good luck 49ers, you need it.
That's true. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what happens in tonight's game with the 49ers, particularly because these are guys we don't really see very often. So that'll be fun. Aaron Jones, how much he's a good play. I think that's the storyline that we're really looking forward to. And guys, thanks for supporting the stream. On the way out, make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And check out our sponsor, No House Advantage. It's betting props, but playing DFS tournaments. All right, guys, good luck tonight, and we'll see you back here tomorrow on the Awesemo YouTube channel.